probably the most heroic thing that one could possibly do. So they did attack Iran. And Iran is honest. We lost 4 officers from air defense. Those air defense capabilities, or the radar or whatever was struck, they were replaced. And as I said, Iran has not used most of its, overwhelmingly, it has not used its capabilities because Iran does not want the United States to know what it has. And that's what the Americans want. But Iran has learned a lot because the Israelis have used their technology, which is American technology. And that information will definitely be shared with friends of Iran. So the Israelis have, and the Americans, have exposed a lot of their own capabilities, not just to the Iranians, but also to other potential, well, not potential, but others that they consider to be adversaries.
The other thing, before this attack, we've seen that in the mainstream media, the way that they were picturing Iran, just going to Iran, assassinating people, making some sort of protest in Iran, overthrowing the government, it's all unbelievably delusional. When you see the way that, because these people, based on these type of rhetorics, they make decisions which is so dangerous for the future. If they want to communicate with Iran, you have to understand at least the reality of Iran and what is happening right now in Iran. But it doesn't
Yeah.
seem that they do have any sort of understanding, real understanding of what's going on in Iran.
This goes back to discussions on Orientalism, a sense of superiority that they have, and the Israelis have. When you're a chosen people, when others are Amalek and inferior, you underestimate them. And American exceptionalism, Eurocentrism, all fall within this broader category. So they always look down at others. They're very Hegelian in that sense. So, and even Marxist for that matter. But therefore, their analysis is based upon this assumption that somehow Iran is abnormal and they are normal. And what is abnormal is not going to last because it is abnormal. It is unstable. And that's why they call Iran a regime. That's why they call Iran's allies proxies, because they always want to give it a sense of illegitimacy. And that's fine. When when they're angry, they say Iranian regime or Iranian proxies. It makes them feel good, sort of insulting Iran or insulting Hezbollah or Ansarullah. But how do proxies win wars against a much more powerful adversary? Proxies don't win wars like Ansarullah does against the Saudis and the Emiratis backed by the West, and now against the United States that's trying to open the Red Sea for this genocidal regime. The United States has failed. We saw just hours ago, Ansarullah struck 3 more ships. The sea is closed to Israel and its allies. Can proxies do that to superpowers? Hezbollah has blocked the Israeli regime in southern Lebanon. It cannot enter southern Lebanon. It cannot take southern Lebanon after a month. And the Israelis have an air bridge. The weapons and the ammunition and the intelligence that the West is giving 24 hours a day, it's not Israel against Hezbollah. It's the whole collective West against Hezbollah. And they can't take territory after a month. Is that a proxy? Would a proxy have such success? A proxy is an entity that gets some money, a budget, and acts as a mercenary. Does that sound like or look like a mercenary? Hezbollah is now the pride of the world. It stood up to this genocidal regime in defense of the people of Gaza. It took these hits and it's still firm. So the point is that the West systematically underestimates its adversaries because of racism. The same is true with Russia, by the way, even though many of them are European, but when the ruble was supposed to be turned into rubble, as Biden said during the early days of the war, I had conversations with Western journalists who specialized on politics and Europe and the economy and Russia, and they all agreed that Russia's economy would collapse, but it didn't. In our discussions, that we came to no agreement, and one of them a year later sent me a message saying, I was thinking about what you were saying when we were in Vienna together, and he was basically acknowledging that he was wrong and I was right. So they constantly underestimate, because there is also this Orientalist view towards Russia as well. Russia was never accepted as Western, they're Slavs and so on. But this, I think, is something which will change. And the reason is that this 500 years of empire is coming to an end. And this latent Orientalism, with this reservoir of knowledge that has been accumulated over hundreds of years, is what prevents them from seeing reality and comprehending reality. And therefore, they cannot make right decisions because their understanding is always wrong. And that, I think, will change, because we are in the dying days of this empire, and it is collapsing very rapidly. What they've done in Gaza has destroyed the collective West. The world sees them as the great violators of human rights. In Russia, they've lost the military war. And economically, we see their decline. People in the West see how things are deteriorating, especially in Europe, but also across the West. Whereas, on the other hand, we see the rise of BRICS, which is, in Kazan, we just saw their meeting, the summit end, very symbolic, very significant, and it is a sign of things to come. So I think that gradually they're going to have to, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but gradually they're going to have to rethink Iran, and they're going to have to for your audience, I know one of your guests, who I won't name, you have very good guests. One of your guests, he's very critical of Iran. He was a former American officer, and he worked for Colin Powell. But what I would say to people, to your audience, is that we've had 40 some years of anti-Iranian propaganda, or let's just say anti-Iranian narratives. For one moment, let's set that aside. In this great moral struggle in the world that we live in today, meaning the Holocaust in Gaza, who is defending the people of Gaza, and who is supporting the Holocaust? Iran is alone against the collective West, along with its a small group of allies. Yemen, the resistance in Iraq, the government of Syria, which is facilitating aid to the Palestinians and to the resistance, Hezbollah, and so Ansarullah in Yemen, as I said. These are the ones who are siding with Palestinians, the oppressed, and the collective West, which support women's rights and human rights and children's rights and animal rights and all the rights that you can name. They're the ones supporting the Holocaust. So my advice is for people to rethink Iran. Iran is not a utopia. There are no utopias. But Iran has a moral compass, and the West doesn't. And I'm sure there's a reason for that.
It's not about Iran, Professor. It's about the way that even the countries in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, even beyond that in Turkey, they don't understand the region. When you look at the way that Saudi Arabia tried to destroy Yemen together with the United States, it seems we can totally understand that they're so out of their mind when it comes to the way that they can deal with Yemenis. They can talk with them, they can have some sort of communication, but they decided to fight them. Right now, it seems that they're getting to the reality. They're understanding the crucial role of Yemenis, Ansarullah, Houthis. And do you think with this the latest attack of Israel on Iran, is that going to change anything in the mind of the Arab states?
Well, there's a big difference, as you know, between the Arab states or the Arab regimes and the people on the streets. And you're absolutely correct. They thought that these regimes, these governments thought that they could destroy Yemen and Ansarullah, or what the West and they like to call the Houthis. And a lot of people in Arabic countries, because they're all dictatorships, they call Iran a dictatorship, but I think anyone who's been to Iran knows that Iran is not a dictatorship. It's a very, you have huge, right now we have debates over what to do, what's going on, what's been happening in this country. We have very diverse views on campus, off campus, online, offline. But anyway, but you don't have these in these countries. So the public is firmly supportive, for example, today of Palestine and hostile towards Israel. But Western countries keep saying the Arabs want to have peace with Israel. They mean those despots or those leaders that are, bound to the West. But many in the Arab world, because almost all of the media is controlled by these regimes, just like the West, where the mainstream media has been able to control public opinion for a very long time. In this region, the media was very hostile towards Ansarullah. And so many people in the Arab world, unfortunately, were skeptical towards them. Even though a genocide was being carried out, there wasn't this sort of sympathy that one would have hoped would have existed. But then came Gaza, and Ansarullah became the sword that defended the people of Gaza. They said that we are going to implement the Genocide Convention, and we will not allow ships to go to Israeli ports as long as the genocide continues. Suddenly, there was an enormous shift in public opinion across the region, because they saw through the propaganda that had been influencing them for decades, because Israel is so horrible. And what the Israeli regime has been doing to this region for many decades is so obvious to the people of the region. In this region, people know what the Israelis do. It's not like in the West, where people, until recently, thought that Israel was a normal country. Now in the West, people are waking up thanks to alternative media, thanks to the fact that information is seeping through, despite the fact that big tech is censoring or using algorithms to downplay what's going on. But young people in particular in Australia and Canada and the United States and Europe see the reality, despite all the efforts of big tech. So, but the Arabs, at least they knew what Israel was doing. And so Ansarullah, the view towards Ansarullah shifted dramatically. And this is something that these regimes are seeing. They're seeing that they were able to demonize Ansarullah. Now Ansarullah are heroes. In Syria, unfortunately, one of the saddest things that happened in this region, Turkey, where I have many friends, both in the ruling party and outside of the ruling party, Turkey, the Turkish government, President Erdogan, conspired with NATO to destroy Syria. And who benefited from this? It was the Israeli regime. And they were also a part of this. And so were some of these Arab regimes, oil-rich regimes in the Persian Gulf. But today, people in the region are seeing that the same countries that were conspiring against Syria to undermine Syria are doing nothing for Palestine, and Syria is being bombed because it is supporting Syria, because it is supporting the Palestinians and the resistance. So many of these regimes or states, Turkey is not a regime, it's because it does have public participation, and it is very different from these countries in the Persian Gulf. But many people are seeing the world very differently now. They see that Syria was not what the Arab media controlled by these governments or the media in Turkey or Western media was saying. It was a conspiracy to destroy Syria for the sake of the Israeli regime, because Syria was a bridge that connected the resistance, the only countries that are willing to do anything for the Palestinian people. Unlike the Turkish government today, which continues to do trade with Israel, indirectly for the most part, through Greece, and which also continues to give it cheap oil from Baku, which the oil used to run the genocide, the war machine. So the mood on the streets has shifted, and I think that governments in the region, to a degree, have to acknowledge that for their own sake. But they are still very much bound to the West, and I think that as this war continues, it will further destabilize or bring about the potential for instability for these pro-Western governments. Jordan helped the Israelis attack Iran, and they helped the Americans attack Iran, and they helped the Americans and the Israelis defend Palestine, the Israeli regime when Iran carried out its counterstrikes. Do people in Jordan support that? Definitely not. So what is happening in the region is not only destroying the West, as I said earlier, because their image has been demolished.